There were big problems in my relationship with Richard. Repeated quarrels and cold wars. We are already struggling. It was at this time that I found out I was pregnant. I went to him with the pregnancy test sheet, but he gave me the divorce agreement. Richard said, "Let's get a divorce." I held the pregnancy test sheet tightly in my hand. I looked at him. The person in front of me is extremely familiar to me, but his expression was cold, distant, and alienated from people thousands of miles away. "Why?" I asked. There was an ironic loneliness in the corner of his mouth. He said casually, "I'm tired. We haven't had sex for more than half a year. You don't have any feelings, right?" I looked at him in astonishment. Richard seemed to have thought of something. He tilted his head in panic and cut off the cigarette between his fingertips. "Last time it was an accident," he said. I'm a little confused, but I reacted quickly. He was probably talking about the time in the middle of last month. He came back from socializing, drank too much, and pestered me to call me my wife. Later we did it as a matter of course. This kind of thing is not only normal but also an obligation for couples during their marriage. But when it came to Richard, it seemed to be something he was ashamed to mention. If I say Richard is tired, it is a slap in the face to me. Then his redundant explanation stabbed me in the heart. The pregnancy test sheet in my hand was wrinkled. I opened the bag and stuffed it inside. I said, "Okay." Richard was stunned for a moment, as if he suddenly lost his temper. He should have prepared a lot of rhetoric, but I didn't give him a chance to use it. This feeling of being neither up nor down clearly made him look aggrieved. But it didn't please me. I thought, why does he think I will be entangled? Even though my hands are a little shaking. He said, "Okay, this is the divorce agreement. Take a look at it. I have divided the property in it. If you are not satisfied, you can raise it. This house will also be left to you." I took the contract and looked at it carefully. Regarding the division of property, if I were asked to comment, there are only two words: generous and fair. At the same time, such a detailed contract cannot be completed in one day. He has planned this for a long time. I asked him, "When did you start preparing?" Richard's tone was a little impatient. "Is this interesting to ask?" "Not interesting. I just want to know if the candlelight dinner I carefully prepared for him the day before yesterday was just self-indulgence." By then we had been engaged in a week-long cold war. The reason was that I wanted to give him a kiss on the face before he went to work, but he refused. He said, "As an old married couple, there is no need to be so bored." Old married couple? Not really. But it has actually been 7 years. 7 years, the itch? His reaction brought the atmosphere between us to a freezing point. With a tacit understanding, we started a cold war. I don't know how he feels, but I feel very uncomfortable. I began to reflect on myself, whether I was too sensitive and making too much of a fuss. So I made dinner and took the initiative to call him and asked him to come back early. He came back and we had a meal without any embarrassment. On the surface, we got back together. But in fact, I know that the invisible film between us is getting thicker and thicker. So it's really boring to ask questions knowingly. I picked up the pen on the table and signed my name at the end of the document. I don't want the house. I looked at the time. It was 10 in the morning. I will arrange for someone to come and pack things in the afternoon. Richard frowned. Why don't you want a house? I looked around. The decoration style here is designed by me personally, according to my preferences. Richard personally supervised the subsequent renovation work and strived to restore it 100% without any flaws. This house was built by Richard and I together. Are you still living here after getting divorced? I'm afraid of hurting myself. I smiled at him and said, I'm tired of it. I want to find a new place to live. Richard's face turned ugly at a speed visible to the naked eye, gritting his teeth. Whatever you want. I nodded. At 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, bring your ID card, household register, and marriage certificate. I'll see you at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Are you that anxious? I sighed in my heart. Richard was in good condition at the beginning and beat me completely, but now he is showing a bit of timidity, and I am the best at scratching people's legs. I'm quite grateful to you for bringing up divorce now. After all, I'm only 29 now and can afford to lose. I heard there's a good market for sisters like me. I raised my eyebrows at him. Time doesn't wait for me, I have to seize the time to find my second spring. Richard stared at me fiercely, his breathing obviously rapid. Ivy, don't go too far, we are not divorced yet. Count down to 22 hours, you won't regret it, right? Richard's eyes were on fire. The countdown is 21 hours and 47 minutes. Whoever regrets it will be his grandson. Satisfied, I turned around and walked out. Wait. Richard stopped me. You just said you had something to tell me. What was it? My hand subconsciously held the bag. No, it's okay. 2. When I returned to the studio, I asked my assistant Rita to bring someone to help me pack my things. She has always been by my side and is most familiar with my daily necessities, food, clothing, housing, and that home. She looked at me in surprise. Sister, what happened? Not planning to hide it from her, I said. We're divorced. Rita was shocked at first, then became angry. Richard is so inhumane. I will clean up right away and won't leave an inch of hair to him. After saying that, she went out angrily. I looked at her back in a daze. Rita has been with me for 8 years, longer than my marriage. So she witnessed everything between me and Richard. She witnessed our deep love. Also witnessed the dissipation of our love. She used to always say to me with an envious look, Sister, I believe in love again. Sister, I will definitely find a man who loves you as much as Richard does in the future. Sister, you are so happy. But now, I think Richard and I should have broken her illusions about love and marriage. What a heinous crime. I took out the pregnancy test form from my bag. This kid came at the wrong time. Richard and I have been married for 7 years. We were not ready to be parents at the beginning, so we both used birth control. In the past 2 years, as we have grown older and with the urging of both parents, we have prepared to have a child. But things didn't go as expected. Then our relationship slowly began to have problems. There are also fewer and fewer opportunities to have sex. As Richard said, except for the last time, we haven't had sex for more than half a year. But I didn't expect that the willow tree would be planted unintentionally. Just wasn't the right time. In this case, it is better to resolve it as soon as possible. After explaining it to the people at the studio, I drove directly to the hospital. I wanted to make an appointment for surgery the day after tomorrow. But the doctor told me that my current gestational sac was still too small, only 0.3. She asked me to go back in a week. A week later, I touched my belly and my mood instantly hit rock bottom. I sat in the car expressionless. I hate waiting. Especially this time of waiting is the growth of a life. How outrageous. A little life conceived by me. I want to wait for him to grow up. But the purpose is to kill him. Just then I received a call from Rita. She asked me, Sister, what should I do with the wedding photos in the house? Wedding photos? My face turned even colder. Trash should stay in the trash heap. Rita's tone was encouraging. Okay, I understand. Later, Rita told me that Richard went back while she was processing the wedding photos. She said that when she saw them throwing the wedding photos out, Richard's face turned green and asked them what they were doing. Then Rita conveyed my words to him. Sister, you don't know, after hearing this, Richard's face turned really colorful. Then he took scissors and scratched up all the photos. Although Richard has done a great job, I always feel that he is in a bad mood. Sister, Richard won't regret it. I sneered. Regret? It's hard to talk about it. It's just a bruised self-esteem. Okay, work. Don't do it anymore, mentioned him. Oh, 3. I didn't expect Richard to let me go. Not only did they not come, they also didn't answer the phone. I sneered. A dog is still a dog. I went straight to his company. The receptionist let me in respectfully, but his secretary stopped me. This girl is somewhat pretty, beautiful but not charming, and I've seen it. Just over a month ago, she helped a drunk Richard home. Richard put his arm around her shoulders, and she put her arms around Richard's waist, as close as if they were conjoined twins. Moreover, in case I couldn't see it, she pointed to the lipstick mark on Richard's collar and said to me, Sister, Richard drank too much and his hands were a bit strong. I accidentally left a lipstick mark. You must not do that. Angry. As long as a man has some capital, it is very dangerous to let it go. Over the years, I have seen so many tricks. This girl's is obviously not good enough. So I said to her, You shouldn't speak at this time. You should be hesitant to speak, be shy, and dodge your eyes, waiting for me to guess and discover by myself. This is what hinders high-ranking people. Do you understand? Then she really started to dodge her eyes and then ran away. But now it seems that the lesson I gave her was not deep enough. Ivy, Richard is in a meeting and doesn't have time. If you have something to do, you can make an appointment in advance. I sneered. Did you prepare the divorce agreement? The little secretary's eyes flashed with joy. Before she could speak, I continued. Little sister, it is obviously unwise to show off your power with me. You may not know that I have shares in this company, not to mention Richard's office. I can even decide whether you want to stay or leave. Decide. The little secretary was obviously swayed by me. What's the noise about? Richard suddenly appeared and said in a bad tone. The little secretary seemed to see the backbone. Richard, it's my routine, but Ivy wants to fire me. Richard didn't even give her a look. He looked at me. What are you doing in the company? Why are you pretending to be a big-tailed wolf with me? I tapped my watch. The countdown is over. Do you want to be my grandson? Richard's face was as black as carbon. I had a meeting this morning and I forgot about it. Okay, I'll let you go once. There's still time. Let's go now. I'll have some more later. I interrupted him. Push. Richard looked at me. I calmed down and looked at him. Richard, I'm not here to joke with you. You're busy and I'm busy too. You've already wasted an hour of my time. Richard sneered. Okay, let's go. We went to the Civil Affairs Bureau one after another. I asked Rita to help me with the equal sign here. When we arrived, there were only 2 left in front of us. Sister, I'll leave first. I nodded and found a place to sit down. Richard snorted coldly. You are really well prepared. What, you have wanted a divorce for a long time, haven't you? You have wanted a divorce for a long time. I don't know how to. Richard, I interrupted him. Why are you so angry with me? What are you unhappy about? You won't regret it, right? How is that possible? Richard stood up abruptly, as if someone had stepped on his tail. I can't possibly regret it, he said. I'm going out to have a cigarette. After saying that, he walked out in a hurry. For the next half hour, we stopped communicating. The 2 of them looked expressionless and even sat far apart, making them look like a divorced couple. The process was quick. It only took 10 minutes for us to get the divorce papers. After leaving the Civil Affairs Bureau, Richard said, Let's have dinner together? Break-up dinner? If you want to say that, that's fine. I smiled and said, No, I have an appointment. With whom? Richard's eyes were heavy. No comment. I got in the car and left. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Richard standing there. He was still standing there until my car turned the corner. Richard, don't regret it. If you play the trick of you only know how to cherish after you lose it, with me, it will really insult the relationship we have had for so many years. 4. Richard and I are university alumni. Our encounter was dramatic. I was 18 years old at the time and had just gotten my driver's license. I drove Dad's car shows off at school. As a result, my skills were so bad that I couldn't park on the side. When I got anxious, I turned on the steering wheel and stepped on the accelerator, directly knocking Richard, who was watching the excitement from behind, into the green belt. Richard originally saw me wriggling around here and thought it was quite interesting, but he didn't expect that he would be gloriously injured. I had no choice but to take on the responsibility of taking care of him. This care lasts for half a month. He is very difficult to serve, talkative and has many faults. That half month was simply hell on earth for me. So he ran away as fast as I could. But he started chasing me. Because of that half month of torture, it took Richard half a year to pursue me. He regretted this very much. He said, I am teasing you because I like you. How can this be considered torture? I am speechless. If you like her, make her cry. Isn't this the logic of a primary school student? Many subsequent facts proved that Richard was indeed an elementary school student. He is naive, he is impulsive, he does not look forward and does not care about the future. He does whatever he wants. It's a pleasure to be with him, because he can always give you the hottest passion. But love cannot always stay at a boiling point. When it slowly drops, it becomes tasteless boiled water. 5. How will divorce affect me? People around you may feel that it is infinitely close to zero. Because I talk, laugh, and remain calm and composed, my work and life have not been affected in any way. But I know that I am just numbing myself with busy work. This way I don't have to dwell on it. I don't want Richard, I don't want the children. But Richard insisted on getting in front of me and even beat my client. The cause was just that the client helped me when I was about to fall. What are you doing? Who the hell asked you to touch her? I only saw an afterimage, and then the man holding me was kicked away. Richard sat on top of the man, pounding him with punch after punch. I reacted suddenly and rushed to pull him. Richard, stop, are you sick? Stop. Richard turned back and stared at me. Are you still fucking protecting him? What's wrong with you? He's my client. Client? His hands are on your waist. Since when do you have to sell your sex to attract clients? Richard, get out of here. My bag hit him hard on the back. Are you crazy? Are you indistinguishable from good to bad? Richard reached out and pushed me out. I was pushed back by him until he hit the pillar behind him. A sharp stabbing pain shot through my spine. Then came my stomach, a twitching, falling pain. I slowly fell to the ground, and a shadow appeared in front of my eyes. Ivy, what's wrong with you? Why is your face so white? Are you bleeding? Where were you injured? I just pushed you gently. Where did you hit? Ivy, don't scare me, what's wrong with you? Woke up again in the hospital. The first thing I saw was Richard. His eyes were complicated. He asked, why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? Why didn't you tell me about the child? Is this what you wanted to tell me last time? Why didn't you tell me? If you had told me. I pulled my hand out of his. There is no if, we are already divorced. Besides, I have no intention of having this child. Richard stood up quickly. What do you mean? It means I will abort this child. Richard looked at me in disbelief. Why? This is our child. Why do you make the decision alone? No, you haven't had an operation after so long. You plan to give birth, right? You're just angry with me. I smiled sarcastically. You're overthinking it. The gestational sac is too small to be suitable for surgery. If you don't believe me, go ask the doctor. Richard seemed to be stimulated by my words. His eyes were wide-eyed and he had a ridiculous look on his face. Why? I looked at Richard. Why? It's just an embryo. Why are you trying to compete with me here? Richard's breathing is a little hastily. An embryo? This is our child. I tilted my head irritably. Go away, we are divorced, my affairs have nothing to do with you. What do you mean it has nothing to do with me? Ivy, please understand that you can reproduce asexually without me. I sneered. It's just an accident. If you shouldn't come, you shouldn't stay. I don't allow it. Richard roared. This is our child, and you have no qualifications or power to make unilateral decisions. I don't know if it was because of the progesterone or because of Richard, but I felt a surge of anger in my heart. I tried my best to suppress it, not wanting to lose my composure. Shameful. But Richard didn't know how to take it easy. He said, Ivy, let's remarry. Bang. His words completely detonated me. Get out, Richard, get out of here. Richard looked at me blankly. He raised his hand towards me and then took it back silently. Finally, he said, Okay, I'm leaving, don't be angry. I lay dejectedly on the hospital bed. Only now did I realize that I had burst into tears. Doctor, can I have surgery now? Can. Okay. Then please help me make arrangements as soon as possible. 6. My surgery was scheduled for the afternoon of the next day. I didn't notify anyone. Just a minor surgery. But Richard appeared again. He asked me, How do you want to keep this child? I closed my eyes and turned my head, not wanting to waste any more words with him. I was wrong. I was wrong. Isn't it okay? Let's stop making trouble and live a good life in the future. Okay? Ivy, we have been in a relationship for 11 years, and now we have a child. Did you really say you don't want it anymore? Richard. I interrupted. Forget it, I don't want to play the game of, if you can't hold on to this identity, just change your identity and continue with you anymore. What do you mean? Richard asked me with a wooden face. There is a joke online that is quite interesting. It says, Never make a woman cry. The tears a woman sheds are water in her brain. Once a woman controls the water in her mind, It will be difficult to deal with her. I used to think it was quite funny. Are women so love-minded? I do not believe. But later I discovered that this seemed to be the case. When one is in the middle of the game, it is difficult to see the whole picture. Once you get out of it, many things will become clear. Do you remember what happened before we got married? Richard, why did you marry me? 7. Richard and I got married not long after graduating from college. He suggested it and I agreed. But in fact, before we got married, there were already problems in our relationship. They say graduation season is breakup season. Entering society, a new circle and a new experience, emotions become a variable. Richard and I are not exempt from this. He started a business with his friends at that time, and I was still in school, working part-time as a designer while preparing for the postgraduate entrance examination. We rented a house near the school. At first he would try to come back every day, and then slowly it became once a week. On that day we made an appointment and he would come back. I even made a table of delicious food. But in the afternoon, he suddenly called and said that something happened and he would not be able to come back. This makes me quite disappointed. But under normal circumstances, I will be considerate of him and tell him that it's okay and I won't come back if he doesn't come back. But that time it was strange and I suddenly got screwed. Tell him, no, you have to come back. Richard was silent for a long time and only said one word, okay. He didn't argue with me or quarrel with me. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until the next morning. While we were still sleeping, his phone rang. I easily took the phone, clicked on the external sound, and put it in his ear. Then a woman's voice came out. She said, "Brother, you tore my black silk stockings, will you pay for it? You don't want to default on it, do you?" Richard sat up quickly and was about to grab the phone. But I moved faster than him. I said to the phone with a cold face, "Brother may not be able to pay compensation. Just tell your sister the address, and she will definitely deliver it to you. I can't even use up the money." The call was immediately hung up. Richard explained, "It's just a KTV. She speaks without restraint and speaks nonsense. Why do you want to be with her? Really? This kind of person is like this, so why do you still contact her?" Richard's expression was impatient. "Just last time, I told you that I accompanied the client and left my contact information. You see, I didn't even save her name. She wanted to call me. What can I do?" But he was soon slapped in the face. I looked through his call history. Just yesterday afternoon, when he called me to say he wasn't coming back, he answered the call from this number 1 minute and called me back the next minute. "What's going on?" I asked him. After a moment of silence, he said, "She called me yesterday and asked me to go out for dinner." He said, "Didn't I go in the end?" I laughed angrily. "Did you not go? I didn't let you go. If it weren't for my tough attitude, would you have planned to buy her black silk stockings and tear them apart? Richard, if you didn't give her any opportunity, how could she get involved with you? You said she's an indifferent person, so why do you still associate with her? Richard, I don't like you like this very much." I was like many girls at that time. I feel like my boyfriend doesn't know that his behavior makes me angry, so I have to tell him and let him change it. But I forgot they all came out of 9-year compulsory education. Who is stupider than who? Richard was very impatient. Okay, I understand. I'll just stop contacting you from now on. But is there really no contact?" I later checked his call records again. In less than 20 days, he made 3 calls, all in the middle of the night. We had another heated argument. In anger, Richard said impulsively, "Break up." After saying this, he regretted it. He hugged me and coaxed me, saying that he just asked that girl to save a place for him. He promised never to contact me again and blocked the number. In fact, until that time, I felt that Richard would not really do anything. He just didn't know how much his actions would hurt me. After that incident, he proposed to me. We say goodbye to our identities as boyfriend and girlfriend and start a new journey as husband and wife. 8. Richard, I asked him, "Did you really not know what you were doing at that time? Or were you looking for something new? Richard, do you really want to marry me? Or are you no longer in love and want to try a different identity?" After 3.5 years of dating, the novelty has disappeared and you can't bear it anymore. So we got married and started over with a new identity. We were very happy when we first got married. We get up together, I make breakfast and he grinds soy milk. Then we went to work together and he sent me to the company first. I said I could drive myself. He said, "If my wife has to do this herself, then what's the use of me as a husband?" He would report everything to me and discuss everything with me. He would also show off to me. Today, another woman asked me for her contact information, but I sternly rejected her. Wife, am I good? Every day after get off work, he always comes to my studio half an hour early and brings me a bouquet of roses. He said, "What others have, our Ivy must double." He would take one day out of every week to go on a date with me. We went to the movies and went camping. He will arrange everything. He said, "We Ivy just need to enjoy it." He rarely goes out to socialize unless he can't avoid it. He would cook, read, and clean the house with me at home. He said, "Hey, it's great to be married. I'm so happy to have a wife. We travel every year, go to different places and see different scenery." He said, "I will take you all over the world until we are no longer able to walk anymore." We seem to be back when we were in love. Everything is so beautiful. He was like a blazing flame burning even my breath. But no matter how big the fire is, it will eventually burn out. Day. When it burns out, all that's left is ruins. 9. But Richard, how long did your passion last? It was only 3 years. After 3 years, his enthusiasm slowly faded. Peace has returned to our marriage. I didn't think it was anything at that time. This is so normal. After all, life is not an idle drama. Everything will eventually return to daily necessities. This is the normal state of marriage. In this way, we lived peacefully for 2 years. Then our relationship took a nosedive and hit rock bottom. 10. After the divorce, I finally began to examine my past with Richard. I broke apart everything I had and crushed it to pieces to look at it. Finally, I saw the whole picture clearly. When did the red light in our marriage start? I think it should start from the fact that we have no desire for each other. It was a very ordinary night. We were lying on the bed, getting ready to sleep, when Richard suddenly leaned over and started kissing me. This is so familiar to us that what happens next is a matter of course. But he suddenly stopped. He held himself up and looked at me for a few seconds, then let me go. He said, "You go to sleep first." I suddenly remembered that there is still some work that has not been completed. I've been with him for so long that I'm past the point of being emotionally sensitive to him. I didn't care and slept alone. He didn't come back that night and slept directly in the study. The next day he went on a business trip for half a month. When he came back, he became a 007 workaholic. By the time I realized it, our relationship had reached a freezing point. If your relationship can't last, you have to get married. If your marriage can't last, you have to get divorced. Now, I looked at Richard. Does the appearance of the child now make you feel that the relationship between us can continue through the relationship between parents? But Richard, I don't want to do this anymore. I talked to Richard a lot. I thought he could figure it out after what I said. But he seemed to be trapped in his own world. He said to me with red eyes, "I won't let you." He stubbornly refused to let me have surgery. He caused a scene in the hospital and even hit the security guard. The hospital was ready to call the police. Looking at the farce in front of me and looking at the embarrassed Richard, I finally nodded and canceled the operation. A relieved smile appeared on Richard's face. I started not to understand him. What is he obsessed with? 11. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days. During these 3 days, Richard stayed with me every step of the way. As if I could abort the child if he didn't look at me for a minute. We haven't had much communication these days. Whether they are a couple or a husband and wife, there are actually many things that we care about but don't say in words. Because words hurt. This degree is difficult to grasp. I've spoken so clearly. It's like tearing apart all the disguises and peeling off all the glamour. The rest was dripping with blood, and both sides suffered losses. When I was discharged from the hospital, Richard asked me where I was going. I said go back to the studio. He frowned. "You need to rest now." I looked at him expressionlessly. "Richard, I didn't promise you to keep this child." Seeing that Richard was getting excited again, I immediately stopped him. I was tired of dealing with his emotions and his behavior. I said, "If you don't give me a ride back to the studio, I'll take a taxi myself." Richard finally gave in. Richard hit my client before, which had a very bad impact on the studio. I asked Rita to appease and compensate the client, and promised to help him design a house for free, and he gave up the idea of calling the police to arrest Richard. However, he requested that I submit the design draft in person. I agreed. The other party has been urging me these past few days. This is why I delayed my abortion. The doctor told me that the best time to have an abortion is between 7 and 8 weeks of pregnancy, and she asked me to decide the time myself. My eyes fell lightly on Richard. Yesterday he asked me, "Ivy, do you really hate me that much?" I didn't answer him. In fact, between me and him, we can't say whether we hate each other, not that much. Heavy. It's just that now we can no longer find a way to continue to get along. Or to put it more mundanely, we're not a good fit. Through the rearview mirror, Richard glanced at me. The moment my eyes met his, I slowly looked away. 12. I worked hard for a week and finally satisfied the customer. This week Richard was as if he was unemployed and had almost set up camp in my studio. Except for Rita, everyone else was envious. Rita didn't like to see Richard. She complained to me, "Men are just cheap. They don't cherish good days. They have to do it. Now they regret it. Sister, you must not forgive him easily." I was stunned for a moment. "Do you think I will get back together with him?" Rita nodded. "There is no big conflict between you and Richard, let alone unforgivable sins such as cheating or domestic violence. Divorce is impulsive. Isn't it only a matter of time that we get back together?" Her words silenced me. When facing Richard and facing so many years of relationship, I sometimes feel in a daze. Am I being too serious? Richard has already apologized, but he hasn't really done anything, not to mention the fact that there are children. Should I just go down the stairs? I'm at a loss, so I decided to give it a try one last time. I signed up for a new parent experience class and took Richard with me. There are many people participating in this training camp just like us. Some people already have a big belly. Some are just showing their love. Some, like me, can't see it at all. At the beginning, the teacher taught a lot of theoretical knowledge. Richard listened to the class carefully, and I looked at him seriously. I can't imagine what it would be like for Richard to be a father, just like I can't imagine what it will be like to become a mother. But as the father of Ivy's child, it seems that this title can only belong to Richard. But Richard, I suddenly stood up. "What's wrong?" Richard asked. "It's okay. Let's go out and get some air. I'll accompany you." I shook my head. "You stay here, I'll go out for a while." I stayed outside for half an hour. I thought a lot, but it seemed like I didn't think about anything. The whole person was in a mess. When I walked in, Richard was holding the child, standing there helplessly. The picture is a bit joyful. "What are you doing at this time?" I asked him. Richard said, "Burp." The instructor on the side explained, "The baby's stomach is horizontal. If you put it down directly after feeding, it will be easy for food to flow back and the baby to choke and spit up milk. Therefore, the baby must burp after drinking milk. Let him eliminate the air he inhaled." I had absolutely no idea about this situation. Do I need it every time after drinking milk? Yes. How often does the child usually drink milk? The teacher said, "Newborns are fed on demand. When the baby is hungry or the mother has breast milk, it needs to be fed. In terms of time, it needs to be fed every hour or two. As the baby grows older, the frequency will gradually decrease. But it also varies from person to person." The teacher smiled and said, "Some children come to repay kindness and some children come to take revenge. The theory is just a theory after all." This afternoon, Richard learned how to hold a baby, how to dress and change diapers, how to burp the baby, how to bathe the baby. When he came out of training camp, he breathed a long sigh of relief. "Are you tired?" I asked. He straightened his body immediately. "I'm not tired." Looking at him, I said, "The only thing in this world that you can't quit halfway is raising a child. From the time he was born to babbling, then toddling, and then slowly growing up, this is something that cannot be stopped once it starts. There is no passion in being a father, only responsibilities and obligations." "Richard, are you really ready?" Richard was about to speak, but I stopped him. "You don't have to rush to answer. I'll give you time to think about it. At the same time I need to think about it. Richard still appears in front of me every day. He gave me the right prepare various nutritious meals. No matter where I go, he is with me. Just like when we first got married. Rita teased me. Sister, can I eat again soon? But my heart is slowly sinking. Richard was a little distracted. Others don't know it, but I can see it at a glance. From time to time, he would be stunned for a few seconds, or occasionally glance at my stomach with a heavy gaze. I want to tell myself that I am overthinking, but I accidentally saw the search interface of his mobile phone. Is it harmful to the body to have an abortion beyond the optimal abortion time? 14. When I saw this search record, I didn't feel too sad. Instead, I breathed a sigh of relief. Richard avoided my gaze in embarrassment. His hand holding the lunchbox was pale and weak. I took the lunchbox and said, "This is the last time, thank you." When I turned around, Richard grabbed my hand. "Are we done?" He looked at me sadly like a man about to drown. He said, "I tried it. I have been going to training camp these days. I want to force myself to accept it. I have no choice. When I think about having a child restraining me in the future, I feel like I am trapped in a swamp. No matter how hard I try, I can't break free of the mud. But Ivy, I love you. We don't want children anymore. How about we start over?" "Ivy, I regret it. I regretted it as soon as you agreed to divorce. Ivy, I don't want to hurt you, but I don't want to lose you either. Ivy, what should I do?" I listened to Richard calmly. I didn't speak, just looked at him quietly. Richard looked back at me blankly, and finally slowly let go of my hand. "Richard, goodbye. Does Richard still love me? Maybe, but more of it should just be habit." "Me too. 11 years. I'm used to having him at home and having him behind me. Suddenly, I was the only one left, and my body and mind were empty. This feeling is very uncomfortable. But what to do? Just let it go? No way. Changing habits is scary. But living the rest of your life relying on habits is even scarier. I am very grateful to Richard. He helped me get out of the confusion, and he made me lose at an age where I can afford to lose. I made an appointment for surgery a day later. Richard went with me. He said he wanted to be with me one last time. I agreed. I was calm throughout the entire process. But when I came out of the operating room, I still couldn't help crying. Richard left silently. Rita scolded Richard for being cold-blooded. I know that he probably doesn't know how to face me. Rita asked me, "Sister, don't you regret it?" I shook my head. "Won't. No, I don't know." I closed my eyes tiredly. We all did a lot of things when we were kids that we would now consider embarrassing and digging our toes into the ground. We will regretfully wonder, how could we have done that? But looking back at the past, did we do it knowing that we would regret it in the future? No. It's just that our life experience and mental age at that time only allowed us to make that choice. The same is true now. I have no way to guarantee whether I will regret it in the future. All I know is that right now I need to do this. As for the rest, leave it to fate. 15. Extra Richard. After Ivy's miscarriage, Richard locked himself at home for half a month. His mother took a locksmith to remove his door and dig him out of a pile of trash. "What do you want to do? Commit suicide by eating takeout?" Richard was sad. He said that he had lost Ivy forever, and he felt like the air was suffocating. His mother sneered after hearing this. "Do you know what you look like now? Like a child who can't eat candy." Richard glared, without batting an eye. "You think it's painful enough now? Where are you now? You won't know what the end of the world means until Ivy starts a new relationship." Richard cried. Even he didn't expect that his mother would make him cry with just one sentence. Richard wiped his tears in embarrassment and growled, "Ivy can't." His mother scoffed. "Ivy is much stronger than you. Sooner or later, she will come out of this failed relationship and start a new life. Isn't this difficult to understand?" Richard couldn't accept it. "I can't accept it just by listening to it. I'm going to find Ivy." His mother blocked his way. "Late." Richard shook his head. "No, as long as I coax her well, I can chase her back. Ivy loves me. Yes, I'll chase her back and let's start over." His mother looked at him with disappointment. "Did you know that after a miscarriage, a woman has to have a confinement period? She rests in bed, pays attention to her diet, and avoids strenuous physical activities. Some people also need infusions to reduce inflammation. I heard that her mother came and took care of her personally. I and your dad went to visit, but he didn't let him in and even threw out the supplements." His mother snorted. You're really embarrassing us." Richard's heart skipped a beat. I don't know. How could he know about confinement? Didn't the doctor say this is just a minor operation? Why do you have to stay in bed for so long? Of course you don't know. His mother said, "You always only care about your own emotions, whether you are happy or not. You hope that there will always be new things in your life, and you can't take any time off. This has been the case since you were a child. It would kill you to do something you don't want to do. Like now, are you really sad about losing Ivy? Or do you feel that this feeling of sadness is something you have never experienced before? It's painful. It's also exciting." "No." Richard backed away repeatedly, picked up the vase and smashed it on the ground. "Why do you say that about me? Why do you comment on my feelings for Ivy like that?" His mother sighed. "Richard, you have to learn to grow up first. You have to learn to take responsibility. Take your time. Anyway, you are now alone without a wife or children. Growth, responsibility. This is a very unfamiliar word to Richard. He has always felt that happiness is the most important thing in a person's life. There are many things that can make Richard happy, and since he met Ivy, 90% of his happiness comes from her. But why did Richard file for divorce? He has no feelings for Ivy anymore. He held her hand like a left hand holding a right hand. He kissed her and hugged her, and his heartbeat stopped racing. He even felt that if he slept with her, he would be disturbed by her breathing. When he was a child, he had a puppy. I liked it very much at first, but then I gave it away because it was troublesome. Ivy is not a puppy, so I can't just say I don't want it. He still has to pretend to be as loving as ever. This is so depressing." Richard felt annoyed. He began to indulge in ambiguous words and physical contact with other people. Quite exciting. At least it's more interesting than at home. So Richard filed for divorce. He was already prepared for what to do if Ivy stalked him, but Ivy agreed. At that moment, Richard's brain froze. No, things should not develop like this. Why did she agree without hesitation? Don't you even bother with him? It's a shame he thought about it for so long. Ivy was obviously trying to please him a week ago. Ivy loves him so much. Why did she agree to divorce when he said it? Richard really wanted to take back what he just said, but Ivy didn't give him a chance to regret. Richard regretted it. He regretted it the moment he revealed the divorce. He wants to see Ivy, but he didn't dare. He stayed with Ivy for 3 days. He hid as soon as Ivy turned around, not even having the courage to appear in front of her. He goes drinking every day. Cry after drinking, the friend said. Forget it, Ivy is obviously not as important as your dignity. If you can't even let go of Face, why are you chasing after your ex-wife? Richard was right when he thought about it. So he mustered up the courage to meet Ivy by chance. Ivy was surprised to see him. She smiled and said, "Long time no see." That look and tone made it seem as if they had never been together, as if they were really just old friends reunited after a long separation. Richard couldn't stand it. He asked Ivy, "Can we start over?" Ivy shook her head. "I never knew it would be so easy for me to let go of you. You did nothing wrong, The decision to get married was the right one." After hearing this, Richard felt a chill on his back and a gray heart. Ivy started a new relationship 3 years after their divorce. Someone asked her when she would get married. Ivy smiled and said, "I no longer assume how far I can go with this person, just let it happen." After hearing this, Richard sneered. She feels that her new love is not as good as herself. After all, Ivy once told him that she was a non-marriage person, but she changed her mind because of Richard. She wants to get married, she wants to grow old with someone. Richard laughed and cried again. He knew that he had killed Ivy, who once had a beautiful vision. He doesn't deserve to be forgiven.